I had a bad wreck, and on my Triumph, lady turned in front of me. I had apes on it. My thumb got chopped off, left in the clutch lever. I went through, and a helmet strap went right through my neck like a garrote. I completely severed my jugular vein. It was in front of a hospital. I went into a coma. They told my folks I was dead. I mean, I've had some doozies over the years, 3 or 4 really, pretty bad accidents, but you wipe yourself down and jump back on.
That's this episode of Patched, where we look at the personal impact of life in outlaw motorcycle clubs.
Are you an active member? The kind that would be missed? Or are you just content that your name is on the list? Do you attend the meetings and mingle with the flock? Or do you just stay at home and criticize and knock? Do you take an active part to help the club along? Or are you satisfied to just belong? Do you push the cause along and make things really thick? Or leave the work to just a few and talk about the clique? Think this over, brother. You know right from wrong. Are you an active member? Or do you just belong?
All right, great to see you, Mooch.
Yeah, it's always great to see you too, Jason.
We have a comment here from one of our listeners. George, in my opinion, has made his mark not only in the 1% world, but in many other areas. I used to despise him, but learned a lot from a buddy of mine who taught me that not everyone can be pigeonholed into a stereotype. George has proven himself as credible, reliable, and genuine. I am almost a patch member of a clean and sober club in Minnesota, but what I've learned through him and this channel and Mooch's book is that we don't find our identities in the club itself, but the brotherhood and camaraderie we find in these clubs. Again, appreciate your diligence and determination to keep the history of the clubs alive.
Yeah, I think that's a great comment. One of the things that I really enjoy as far as that takeaway is, we've talked about before that, when someone joins a club, generally they should come in already knowing who they are as a person, what they're willing to do, and not have that, they have the confidence when they come in. And the issues we've seen before is when the people come in there and the patch is their whole identity, right? And those are the guys we see that really struggle when they leave club life too. But they're often the ones that are getting in trouble and did you know who I am? And so coming in with your own confidence of who you are as a person and knowing who you are, having your own identity, goes a really long way. And like they're saying about George, there's different people have different strengths and you're playing to their strengths. There's a guy that's great at communication. There might be the tough guy, the guy that's good with the numbers, that's good with the books. And so, there's no way to really pigeonhole bikers. And so I think that was a really good comment.
Yeah, and I like how he's talking about how you can almost evolve from being around the group. You know what I mean? Like we talked about, like going in, being genuine, but then you are going to take away from these guys from within the charter, from within the group overall. You're going to take away different characteristics and things that you learn from these guys, and you're going to add it to yourself, right? You're self-evolving. And I think that he's saying here, like, yeah, I'm gonna go in with an open eye because I think that through the brotherhood and the camaraderie, I'm gonna learn a few things and add it to my resume. And I think that's a great way to look at things.
Absolutely, and I think the piece too that sometimes gets missed is that you don't just get your patch and have brothers, right? You've got to earn it, and that camaraderie comes from being on the road, late nights at the events, going through things together, whether it's riding through the rainstorms or fixing a bike on the side of the road. That's when you really build that brotherhood and camaraderie, and it only comes from spending time in the club and with the club. So it's something that's really earned. And so guys like George and guys like us that have been in club life for a long time, that's why we have that. It's something that we earned over the years and worked really hard towards. So it's really getting that experience, I think.
Yeah, good question.
Another question we got is, what do 1% clubs feel about mental health issues? It's becoming a topic that's moved into the light in the mainstream, yet it isn't when people outside the mainstream talk about these things. What are your opinions?
That's a good question, but it's hard to, I don't want to put a label on any club or any person to say that they're all thinking about it. But it is on everyone's mind. Everyone's got insecurities. Everyone's dealing with some issues. So I can't say for certain that the actual 1% community is discussing this in open forum, but hopefully they are, because like how we've talked about in episodes, the more you can see these tells or with your brothers as they're going through issues and you know someone's struggling, the more you like go to them and say like, hey, how are you doing? Or can I help you? Or like, let's just get it off your chest. You know, like those are real issues that people need to be discussing. So I can't say that like we're getting this, that I know for a fact that people are having open forum discussions about mental health in the charters, but there are people that are starting to say we have to pay attention to this because it's a real deal.
Yeah, I think, historically, alpha males and tough guys have a hard time sharing their feelings. And one of the things we've been wanting to do with this podcast, is our goal, is at least getting people talking about it, making it more normalized and that it's okay. I have a kind of a different experience because, I'm a mental health therapist. So I used to always laugh about in my chapter, there's a bunch of tough guy alpha males, and I'd be, so how do you feel about that? And how's everything going? So, my chapter openly talked about it, but that was more from my leadership. But at the end of the day, that's the whole goal of this podcast, is to make it normalized that grown men have feelings and we could talk about these things. And if you're really a brother, you should be able to hear them and hear them out and help out. So that's kind of the direction we're going, and that's what we're hoping to do with this show.
We did see so many people over the years mask their true emotions to try to fit in with the crowd time and time again, and then it catches up to them so quick that people go, oh, what happened to so and so? And it's like, well, nobody ever went up to them besides giving them a hug at a party to say it's good to see you, to say like, how are you doing? And like those words are impactful when someone's going through it.
Something that really resonated with me a long time ago was in Billy Queen's book. So Billy Queen was an undercover agent in the ATF, and he went undercover in the Mongols in the 90s. But there was a point when he was undercover when his mother died, and he said no one from the ATF reached out. No one said anything. But he said the Mongols gave him big bear hugs and said, I'm sorry to hear about your mother. If there's anything you need, let us know. And that's the piece that a lot of people are missing when it comes to the real brotherhood of club life, is that we do care, and we do care about you and your family. But it takes you reaching out too, and you saying something. So that that it's a really strong thing, and I think it only increases the brotherhood, but it has to be an awareness that everyone's ready to get started.
All right, our next thing, we're going to wrap 2 comments into one discussion because it's kind of important that we get this out there. The first one is, wow, an outlaw podcast that beeps out the cuss words, LOL. Now that is directed at me 100%. The second one is, you guys sold out to your sponsors, which, believe me, Mooch and I both understand what you're saying, but Mooch, you go first on this, and then I'll follow up.
Yeah, listen, guys, the whole goal of this podcast is to help people that have been through stuff like us or similar journeys, whether it's veterans, first responders, just the regular person. And our whole goal is to get our word out there to help people. And in order to do that, we have to spend money to make these episodes. We're paying out of pocket. We're not getting paid to do these. And so in order to really help and get this going, we have to have sponsors. The more sponsors we get, the bigger our show can get, which means the more people we can help. And that's our goal. And when it comes to beeping out the cuss words, it's the same thing as far as the way the algorithms work on YouTube, and the way that we get broadcast to other people. We have to keep it PG so that other people can listen to our show and we're not offending anyone, and make sure that as many people as possible are able to see our show.
If anyone knows of any independently wealthy 1% motorcycle member, then please send them our way to be able to sponsor this whole thing, because this all costs a lot of money. And we are here to put up with whatever we have to do to make sure that our message gets out. There's a lot of people that are telling us that like this is helping them through some very dark times, right? And it's like we can't just do this for like 2 seasons or 3 seasons, flash in the pan, and then go away, because there isn't people in our culture that are going to take the reins and keep this going. So yes, we are excited for every single time somebody says they want to sponsor and they want us to read an advertisement. I mean, we want to be able to take trips and visit people and have all that be aired and actually show us like talking with guys on the road, or going to clubhouses. Like that's our dream, is that this all expands so we can actually do some physical hands-on help to the brothers we know who are struggling. And we cannot do that if we don't have money.
And you know what? At the end of the day, like we said, our mission is to help people. The sponsors we have on the show, the services they're offering, are here to help people as well. So we're not quite selling out as far as just doing anyone that comes at us as a sponsorship. We have a lot of sponsors that are also there to help people. And so it aligns with our morals and values and our mission. So, we do pick and choose our sponsors, and we want to make sure they align with us. So, something for everyone to think about. But like Jason said, at the end of the day, we have some big plans for this show, big dreams for the show, and we can't get there without help.
Well said, brother.
All right, guys, I'm really excited about this next episode. I think it's a strong one, and it's really going to resonate with you guys. We have Spike from the Hessians, and we do a real deep dive into clubs working together and how much can be accomplished when we all work together.
Spike has got a great history in the motorcycle culture in California and across the nation. He has put in a lot of work and a lot of time to better the motorcycle culture, and I have nothing but mad respect for this guy.
All right, guys, here's another great episode. Check it out.
With us today is Spike, member of the Hessians for over 32 years. Spike and I go back a long time. We were instrumental starting in the NCOC, the National Coalition to Clubs. We spent a lot of time on the road together and dealt with a lot of different issues that were going on in the clubs at that time. Spike, you want to tell us a little bit about what got you into motorcycles in the UK?
Yeah, sure. I grew up, I was actually born in Germany in a British Air Force base. Went to England as a youngster. Always loved motorcycles. My father had my first bike I can remember him riding was a Triumph Super Twin, and then he got my favorite bike of all time, a Vincent Black Shadow. So I've been around motorcycles. Many of my friends when we was at school would spend all our hours in the metal workshops making parts for our bikes when we were 15, ready for 16 when we was going to be able to officially get out on the roads on them, with a big red L on the front of them for learners. It was a pretty arduous task to take a motorcycle test in England compared to what it is here in the States. We could ride up to a 250cc, so we weren't rushing around on anything too big in the beginning, unless we had a sidecar, and then we could go bigger. So I'd always loved the motorcycle scene. My very first thoughts, I remember a very large club, one that you're very familiar with, back in England, roaring past us in our little standard 10 car, going down to the beach one summer, and I was up at the window with my nose flat against the glass saying, wow, I want to be like that when I grow up, you know. And there I was. I kind of followed my early wish.
Spike, what was your first bike? So, kind of what year was this when you first got it, building the bikes and learning, and then what was your first bike?
My very first bike was a Triumph. Of course, being British, it had to be a Triumph. And it was a little Triumph Tiger Cub, 200cc, which fit into that area that we was allowed to ride. A lot of people had aerial arrows. We had aerial leaders. We had the BSA Bantams, and we didn't get into the Nortons until we were a little bit. We'd grown up more in big boy shorts instead of the little boy
Right.
shorts. But some of the friends had the little 125cc Yamahas and the Suzukis, so we had a good cross section of bikes that were available to us.
Something that's kind of funny for my history, but some of the guests have heard me share. But I started out on a 250cc Vespa, so a little different frame. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you'll get it for sure. I came from the traditional skinhead scene, the punk rock scene, and so we all grew up riding Vespas. But similar thing, 15, 16, working on them, figuring out how the motors work, and not going too fast until I actually rode a big bike and realized the difference in power and acceleration. But that's really cool. So when did you start graduating up to bigger bikes?
As soon as I passed my test, and the test, as I said, was real tricky back there. We had to be followed by someone. We had to get on freeways. We had to stop on hills. We had to go through a much more rigorous test. To be quite frank, most people normally failed it the first time. And, a lot of people would go several times, 2 or 3 times. Plus the wait time was so long that we had to, deal with what the cards were dealt to us, and we'd get on the little bikes. Then I got up to a 650 Goldie, and that was my first experience. I had cast iron heads, and I went from cast iron heads to aluminium head, and that's when I first got up to the 100-mile-an-hour mark, which was, of course, back in the day, the big number, the ton-up club, we called it.
I think it would be a lot of pressure to know you had to do that stop on a hill, right? Like, that would be like probably the most stressful part I could see. That's completely different than what we do in the States. Like, they're not telling anyone that you need to go to an incline and then stop and start from there. So, like, that would be a little bit of pressure right there from... But what I wanted to ask you, Spike, is that you said that was something that you had a relationship with your father because he was into bikes. Did you have a close relationship with him, or was it just that you guys had a common interest and that it ended up being motorcycles?
No, actually, my father, the only thing he didn't back me was my martial arts. Although he was in the military for 22 years in the Royal Air Force, he also boxed at the English level. He didn't want me to get into boxing, but he didn't restrict me didn't say anything about martial arts, so I took up martial arts. But when it came to the motorcycle and fishing, we're both avid fishermen, he helped me out a lot with the bike, and especially bearing in mind, at the age of 17, I believe, in 1972, I had a bad wreck and on my Triumph, and I had apes on it. My thumb got chopped off, left in the clutch lever. I went through, lady turned in front of me, and a helmet strap went right through my neck like a garrote, and I bled out. I completely severed my jugular vein, and it was in front of a hospital. So my mom, of course, didn't want me to get back on a bike, and it was because of my dad and his support that I was able to get back up on a bike as soon as I was able, and carry on a lifetime of loving motorcycles.
That's amazing.
What was that like, getting back on the bike after a near fatal accident?
Well, luckily, you know what, Mooch, it wasn't as bad as you might think, because I don't have any recollection of the actual accident. There was a lot of witnesses there. It happened in front of a famous hospital called Stoke Mandeville Hospital, where they started the paraplegic Olympic Games, and I went into a coma. They told my folks I was dead at one point. Of course, back then, we didn't have all the high-tech equipment, and in fact I went into a coma. All my veins dried up, so they couldn't put anything back in to my veins. It was hard finding the veins to help me along, and ironically, when I left hospital, the thing that hurt the most was my arm, where they tried to put blood into me.
Yeah, they were stabbing you a bunch of times.
I didn't have a fear of riding after that accident. I know the three of us have had dodgy moments out on the road where you almost go down and you go, well, in the next 5 minutes you ride much more.
Yeah, you get cautious.
Yeah, and you slow down, but that didn't really affect me. I've had some doozies over the years, had some 3 or 4 really, pretty bad accidents, but you wipe yourself down and jump back on. And
what about your parents? How did they reconcile with you being back out on the road after that?
Well, like I said, my dad was very supportive. He helped me rebuild that Triumph after the accident, and he managed to get me some fancy medals off the RAF base to rebuild it. And it was, I was back out there, and, my mum cringed. I've still got that original helmet that severed my neck, actually. Wow. And I cleaned it all up, got the blood off of it, and no one expected to see me again, especially the first police officer on scene and the ambulance drivers. They were frightened to move my head because the strap had got so far into my neck.
But your dad knew that he had to push you to get back to it. You know what I mean? Like, otherwise, you'd be gun shy to the bike and probably give it up. So, you did the right thing by, let's get back to it and let's get back on it and get back involved in it, because he knew that was a long passion that you had.
And to be honest, he didn't have to do much pushing, because the first thing when I came around is, how's my bike? You know?
Yeah.
And
That's how you know who the real
bike,
bikers are, man.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
always the first question for the real ones. Is my bike okay?
Yeah.
Your arm will be dangling off. Is my bike okay?
yeah.
Well, because we don't want to replace those things. Yeah.
Right. Well, Spike, I don't want to go too far in the interview with ignoring the martial arts piece, just because that's something I'm super stoked on. I grew up wrestling and boxing, and then the last 8 or 9 years I've been doing Brazilian jiu-jitsu. So I'd be really curious, and some Filipino martial arts. So I'd be really curious to hear like what your martial arts background's like and how the training was for you.
It was very heavy duty. I actually started off doing Shotokan. I did submission ryu, but then the skill set that I fought for England was Taekwondo. I fought in the national championships.
Oh, wow.
The first time as a green belt, taking on first and second degree black belts to get the bronze medal, and that was my first taste of getting into the national scene. I trained, and I also used to teach martial arts, and then when I came to the States, we had a group out in Lakewood, California. My friend, they called him the Rhino, and in fact he fought Hoist Gracie and Rory and Gracie, and he was a great fighter, and he did Chinese jiu-jitsu. He did 6 different styles, and he was 4th degree in 6 styles, and he did some kind of secret squirrel work for the government, I believe. But,
how did he do in those fights with the Gracies?
He did really well. In fact, this was before the MMA. We taught a lot of the early MMA fighters, from California.
Days, right? Like the early gym storming, or dojo storming days.
Yeah, and in the beginning, the Gracie brothers, when they took over MMA, when they started it up, there wasn't fighting very many karate guys, to be honest. In the early days, they wouldn't fight. I know Benny the Jet was hoping to fight, and some of the really old school karate guys, and we was there. I also did some bare fist knuckle fighting down at the docks in Long Beach in the early days, and that was no fight. There was no weight categories, because I was a scrawny little guy, and I used to fight at 148 in Taekwondo, which was lightweight, and I was taking on some Samoans twice my weight, so that used to be fun.
Are you still into martial arts? Do you still train or teach?
Yeah, I don't teach anymore now. I moved. I was teaching a little in California, and I can't say training anywhere like I used to train, because I'm 70 years old now, and I'm more into Tai Chi than Taekwondo or anything like that. But it served a good purpose. Never done a drug in my life, so when being in an Outlaw Motorcycle Club and being recognized as a club that's got a dark history and got a bunch of scallywags that we've had over the years, I had a hard time in the beginning, because I couldn't prove myself with in the drug scene, because I didn't partake, which raised a few eyebrows about my loyalty and stuff like that. But I stood my guns, and I became more of the muscle than the fun guy,
Yeah,
So.
but that shows a lot about your character, that you stuck to your guns.
And nowadays I've had people come up and say, I respect you for that, and they've gone through there. My own sergeant at arms for many years, he was into everything, and then he became a drug counselor, and he was really good drug counselor, because Big Dog had been through it all. I couldn't say to my guys, hey, you need to get off those drugs, or can I help you get off the drugs? And they'd say, well, what do you know about it, Spike? You don't. But my brother Big Dog, he'd been through everything and probably invented a few drugs, and he was such a help to everyone as a drug counselor for many years, and he was clean and sober.
Was he
So
doing
my
that while was he an active club member when he was doing the drug and
Sure.
alcohol counseling?
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
'Cause we've talked about it before, and you know, because you know Poor Boy and some of these guys, but you know, my old club had a history of, you know, being in the drug and alcohol counseling scene. And I think now you would know more than me, but I feel like nowadays it's not that, you know, a lot more people are drug and alcohol free in the club scene than back in the day. I think it was like you said, it was like pretty much that you're supposed to be involved, right? So I think that's probably changed a lot. But that's what, you know, I got into drug and alcohol counseling as well as a one percenter. So I always loved hearing that story. And I also think it's cool, you know, from the, we've talked about this before too, but from a martial arts standpoint, or any healthy thing, right? Like working out or whatever, keeping the brothers active in something positive, like martial arts or working out, often keeps people off drugs and alcohol because, like you said, you were competing and stuff. You want to be in the best shape you can be in. You're fighting at the docks. You want to be hungover or tired or slow. So it like gives you a reason to stay sober too.
Yeah, that's a good statement right there.
The brothers are less of a liability to themselves in the charter. You know what I mean? I mean, we saw that for so many years. Guys that really didn't like know the drug scene but came into the clubs and then jumped into it and without any real guidance, because who's going to give you like the school of like how this all works? They're just like, here, come along. And how many guys didn't make it because they jumped into that as opposed to
Absolutely.
staying away from it because they thought it was cool. You know, I saw
that as a big detriment to club life because, you know, we've talked about Spike or off air with some of the other guys too, that, you know, one of the things is when you're bringing someone into a club, right, and you want to call them your brother, and which we were talking about earlier about prospecting and stuff, you'd want the best for them. They're supposed to be your brother, right? And how could I have that on my conscience that I bring this guy into the club and he falls off on drugs and alcohol? And I never wanted to look back and someone say, oh, I joined the club and it ruined my life. I wanted people to say, oh, I joined the club and I got healthy, I got good brothers, I was working out, you know, these positive things that come with club life. And I think, you know, leadership and all these people have this opportunity to do this, but that old school method of, oh, if I'm supposed to be partying, I should be doing drugs, and we've seen so many people fall off from that.
Well, it's not even necessarily like you should be doing drugs. This is the fact that we don't want anybody to tell us what to do, right? And that's the whole thing. Like we don't want anybody to tell us what to do. That's why we're on these bikes. That's why we ride down the highway at night. Like we love that, right? We love that whole thing. But we know that people need guidance, including ourselves sometimes. And it's like you cannot say that everyone should be free to just do willy-nilly whatever, because a lot of people just don't know like the ramifications from it, right? So some people have to speak up to help the youth. The older guys need to take a leadership role, whether they're a leadership position with a tag on their chest. They just need to take a big brother role to these guys coming around the club to give them some help.
I had a chapter president once when I was prospecting that knew I wasn't doing drugs and alcohol, and he said, if I find out that you start doing drugs and alcohol now as a prospect, he goes, you'll never get my vote as a member. And that's something that stuck with me for a very long time because, like, this, A, he cares, right? And B, cares about the club and the types of memberships he's getting. And I think stuff like that would go a long way when you're teaching the new generation.
Absolutely.
Sure. Back in the old days, I think, I've never tried to judge or any of my brothers that have been involved. I've got to say, most of the time, you wouldn't even know. And, you know, I've never had pressure, peer pressure to say, well, you have to, you know, or anything like that. And I've ridden with some of my brothers, you know, across country, and I've never ever had anyone that I've been fearful. I've been riding alongside because I know they might, you know, partake in some pick me up, or you know, I myself have ridden probably way too many times under the influence of alcohol. You know, I being a limey, you know, I like up my beer and that, my Guinness, and and sometimes I probably ride better. I thought at least I could ride better than I could walk.
We think we're riding better for sure.
Well, you know what all it's really doing for us that ride those long miles is it's just taking the edge off of those hours and the repetitive hours on the road. People don't really understand what it's like to ride 500, 700 miles in a day and how long that actually takes. Yeah, you can be in a car and do 700 miles, you know, and you do 80 miles an hour and you can go continuous. But when you're on the bike, you're stopping every 90 to 120 miles to fuel up, to get something to eat. It's a time-consuming process unless
There's
you
no
can.
distractions.
Yeah, it's the highway.
Like in a car,
Yeah. There's,
in a car, you'd be listening to the radio, talking to friends.
Yeah.
I mean,
Make a call.
Nowadays, you listen to music and stuff. But yeah, people are on their phones and
Yeah.
doing all sorts of things they shouldn't be doing. And or taking a nap, right? And like,
Yeah.
time flew by. On a motorcycle, you're paying attention to everything in
whole
front of you the whole time. Especially in a pack where you got a bike in front of you and behind you.
It can be a daunting task, especially if the weather is not good. I mean, it's just, there's so many factors in riding a motorcycle that you have to be on your game. And sometimes you need that little thing to take you off the edge. There's just something magical about when you're on the road and you still have to go 300 to 400 miles, to get to your destination. And most people we know are like, I would give up. I mean, that's the difference. That's the difference with the guys that have been in our shoes and they are in these clubs and they do this thing year after year after year in the rain and the snow and heat and during the summertime, and you can't split lanes in this state and you can in another state, and it's like there is so many factors that I love looking at my bike, but sometimes I get home and I look at it and go, you just stay right there for a moment. I need a break. I need a break from you. I need a break from you for 5 minutes
until the next day.
Yeah, until the next day. Yeah, you want to wash it up and get it ready to go again. But you're just get off of it. You're like, okay, you're set. The kickstand's down. I need to go and just be away from this for a moment.
The whole essence of this biker culture is, we are independent. We do have rules and protocols, but at the same time, if my brother wants to do something, I'm not his mother, I'm not his father.
Yeah.
But if he comes to me and says, "Can you help me?" I'll be there to help them. It's a tough call because none of us are perfect. And if what I might see as an imperfection on someone, they probably see something on me that they find an imperfection, which I have no idea. And I think the bottom line is we got to be there for our brothers. That's the bottom line.
Yes.
And if we can help them, I don't think we should necessarily push ourselves on them. But I totally agree with what you're saying about the youngsters coming in. So give them a chance to make up their own mind in that, hey, I haven't done this. Some people will. It's your choice. And you know what? I'm not here to tell you really what's right or wrong. You should know as a person. But if you need help and you want my opinion, come and you'll definitely get it. And I think it's a fine line there. We can't judge our brothers, but at the same time, we got to be there if they need help.
And you know what? And you know how guys are when they come into the club, right? We were all there. We had tunnel vision. We're like, hey, we're joining this motorcycle club. Regardless of what club it is, it doesn't matter if it's mom and pop, whatever it is. You're coming around a group of people where you're thinking to yourself, I've got to be on my game, right? When some guys put on this, they put on this character. We talk about it in the podcast. They put on this character that they can't always keep up because it's not really truly them, right? So it's much easier to be yourself, let the guys in the charter know who you really are, then they're going to accept you for who you are. You'll never have to put that character on, at different times and worry that you don't have it on at certain moments. But to let guys know that they can drop their guard and actually be themselves when they come around guys in the charter or in the club, because that's what it's supposed to be. We're supposed to know who you really are and what really makes you tick and what your needs are, what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are. We want to know all that stuff to really put together a group of guys that we know about. You know what I mean? And I think that's the hard part with I think the younger guys these days, that they're still trying so hard to be so macho or tough to come into these clubs, the image, right? And it's overwhelming. You talk about you're taking your patch Spike or your patch Mooch or my patch, and you put these things on, and the stories alone from these three patches and the things that have happened between these clubs, and if you're not tough as nails, then you might not make it. So everyone puts on this extra couple inches, and they get, they talk a little different, and it's just take it back a notch and just be yourself. Because the guys that I really clicked with in the group were the guys that weren't putting on that persona. They were just themselves, the genuine guys. You looked forward to seeing them at runs. how I looked forward to seeing you, Spike, or seeing Tombstone, or seeing Rags when we would go to places. And I'm like, these guys, I know how they think. I know how they feel. I know how they feel about everyone in the culture, how they're what they're here for. Like, so anything that they would say or do or needed, then I knew that it was like genuine. And that's what you want to be. That's what you want to be around. That's what you want to surround yourself with. That's the message we're trying to get to people. Not to mention helping them with adjusting when they leave the club and getting back into normal life, but just showing people that, like, hey, you just be yourself. You don't have to be this guy. You don't have to be this guy.
Should be the biggest takeaway.
Yeah.
Should be the biggest takeaway.
Just be yourself.
I'm sure you've seen it, Spike, and Jason's talking about it, but how many guys were a certain way and then they join the club and they prospect and they're a whole different person when the patch comes on, or they're a different person when the patch comes off, and to me, those weren't genuine people, right? And there's probably a reason they didn't make it in that life. But,
you hear these stories from, like, let's say the circle. We all have our own circles, right? Spike, when you were in Southern California, you had a circle of people, whether it was people you did martial arts with or you worked with or whatever it was. They all saw you as Spike the Hessian, but none of them were in a motorcycle club, right? And we all have those circles. And you'll hear from people outside of this person's circle or in their circle, and they'll say that he was never like that before he joined the club. And it's like, well, why did you change? Because, like, it probably would have worked out better for you, these guys, if they would have just come to be themselves. That's what all the clubs are really looking for, is genuine people, man.
And the other thing that I think is important with the fresh youngsters coming in, they've grown up in a different world, different society, different time, and they try to assimilate to what we was doing back in, say, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s. And in each decade, things have changed. The laws have changed. We used to have, and this is no bull, we would have fist fights in the bars quite regular, and no one would get arrested or taken away. If law enforcement showed up, they might sit us down on the side and find out it's just a bunch of, upset guys having a little fist fight, and it didn't go too far. There was no guns, no knives, and they'd say, okay, don't do this again, or you'll be coming in. You better get home right now. And of course, you can't do any of that stuff anymore because the life has changed.
Yes.
And you just give someone a stinky eye in a bar or something, and next thing you know, if that person doesn't have to be of the same race or ethnicity or religion, you can find yourself hit up with all sorts of things without even throwing down.
Yeah.
So things have changed, and these youngsters are coming in trying to make a name for themselves. They should be making a name by being loyal, being there, being committed, and the commitment level has disappeared from when I was. I don't know how some people even make it in the outlaw world, especially if they've got a family or if they've got a significant other. It's very testing on the families and the significant others. And I was single all through this, just enjoying life and having a great time as a single male with his motorcycle, just having a really good time. But when you have a serious relationship, you suddenly got to explain everything to them when they start. And as a president, when I had new guys coming into the club, I would not only talk to that individual, but when he'd done some time and been hanging around and was seriously taking it about becoming a prospect, if he'd got a significant other, I'd even take her aside and say, is this going to be for you? You're going to have to share your husband's time with us, the club, because he's going to be married to you and the club. And there's going to be times when he can't even tell you what's going on for your own safety. And some of them just couldn't take that. And, if you don't have the support of your significant other, then
if you don't have the good network at home, it's going to be real tough to do it. And then look at all the times we saw guys that would constantly come to the room, right, for church, and you're like, okay, hey, we're getting ready to go on another run, or we're planning for this, and they're always coming up with that excuse because they can't go, because they can't balance home life doesn't want them to go, right, and they also can't tell. home life that they're gonna go. So it's like then they're getting into worse things in the room because now the pressure is you don't go anywhere and where are you and what's going on, and that like you said, Spike, unless you bring it up in the beginning and say, hey, we got 4 major runs a year, you have to be ready to go for them, make sure your bike's ready and it's going to cost extra money and all this other stuff. Are you ready for that, and can you commit to that year after year? And I know things come up, like emergencies, and family comes first and all that stuff, and I get all that. But, like, if you're joining a motorcycle club, as a new member, you should be excited to go on these runs, and you should be representing your charter at these runs as much as possible, because it is
that's
what
the reputation
it
piece,
is.
right?
It is what keeps it all going. You can't get in and immediately look for an excuse not to go. It's like we've talked about.
That should be the guy, like that Spike was saying with the reputation piece, right? Instead of I'm trying to make my name, your name is be the guy that's at everything.
Yes.
Hey man, I see that guy at all the events. He's always on his bike. He's riding. And when it comes to the old lady thing too, like you were saying, Jason, maybe they'll just leave early, right? But what if they still go out, but then they're just on their phone? They're not paying attention because they're fighting with their old lady, right? They're not present. They're not really there. And from what I've seen, very few people last in the club world if their partner is not on board with what they're doing. And even little things, right? Like, my wife, when we first started dating, knew that every night I deleted all my texts and my phone was always face down and you couldn't talk to her about stuff. And, other chicks would think, oh, that means he's cheating. Like, there's so many different things that they have to understand and get on board with, or they're going to be a miserable member. And if they're a miserable member, they're not likely going to be a good member.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's always been a really big issue.
It's a tough.
And one of the things, did you guys watch the Bike Riders movie?
Yes.
One of the things I really resonated with that was that whole dynamic between the main character's wife and the president. That push-pull, like you said, Spike, it's a marriage almost, right? So I've seen so many old ladies or wives be jealous of the president's your president says you have to be here. Well, when I say you have to be here, you're not there. And I've seen that happen so much where there's this push-pull between the family and the club. And I think that plays a big part in that relationship as well.
And that's what I've witnessed. I love my brothers in my club because, from the outside looking in, you might say, oh, they're a bunch of old scooter tramps. But the commitment level from the old school biker protocol it's really quite phenomenal. When I look at what I used to put my guys through, we would be doing, of course, in California, we had bike nights every night of the week. So Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, when we'd have church, we would go out after church and normally go bar hopping or go to an event or something. Sometimes we'd go weeks and weeks, 7 days a week, plus you're trying to get other stuff in. And when we'd have church, I would want to know what's going on with the interaction between other clubs, what the scoop is on the streets and where they've been for during the week. So I wouldn't have to say, hey, guess what, Joe Blow, you're not going to enough events. He would sit there and be kind of looking down at his feet when so-and-so say, yeah, I went to such and such event and I went to this one and we'd note that down. And, they're, in a way, we would force people for that commitment, but I always wanted to see them wanting to go.
Yeah,
I loved to go. I just loved it. That was my life. That's my commitment. It still is today. I'm still very much involved, and I just can't wait to get to the next national event where we're bringing all these clubs and personalities together, and in the hope that we can connect and at least have some level-headed people, the upper echelon that can communicate. We don't have to break bread with one another, but we do need to communicate, and we do have a lot in common. More so than the outside.
I mean, like, hey, we're all on 2 wheels. I mean, like, let's just start right there. I mean, we like to be out on the open road. I mean, there's so many things that these guys all have in common, and from different, from the northwest to, to Florida, like everywhere in between. There's just so many connections and so many, great people to meet along the way. And it's like you said, Spike, if we're all communicating, at least we're talking, it can all be done. It's like, it's not. Right. I was there. I mean, I saw it. Spike would usually be by himself. I'd be by myself. It's like we knew that like it could all work just based off these little trials, you know, of us being in different places.
Let's get into that part. And really quick, the catch-22 on that commitment level, right? Spike, I'm sure you've noticed too, is when you make things mandatory, I'm always on that catch-22 of they shouldn't be here unless they want to be here, right?
Yeah.
Like,
so why does it need to be mandatory?
We should all be excited to be there, and it's rough when people don't. Let's circle back a little bit, Spike. We were talking about coming up with motorcycles, and your father was into it. So, and you're kind of some family history there. But what was early life like for you in the UK, and then eventually, like, what led you into professional careers, and what was your education like out there?
It's quite long-winded. I'll try and give you the short version. I had planned to go into the military at 15 and leave school. At 15, I had one AA degree by then in art, and I was planning on going to a paratroop regiment. I started doing paratroop regiment training, and I was running up, and doing paratroop jump and rolls and tucks and all this sort of thing. And suddenly I got whisked away. Bearing in mind I was very athletic, and I played rugby, and I was doing my martial arts and playing soccer and doing gymnastics and playing cricket and playing basketball. So I was doing all sorts on all the teams at school. It was just crazy. I was just a sportsman on steroids, really, not literally, but I was just doing everything out there. And the SAS suddenly popped up, which is our special forces, and so they whisked me away, and I thought I was going to have an illustrious military career in the SAS. That was the time I had the accident, my motorcycle accident, and so all of a sudden, with no thumb and my neck and the time it took to get ready, that went out the window. So the government actually was kind enough to step in and say, what are your interests? And I said anthropology, architecture, and archaeology, the 3 A's. They managed to slip me into an accelerated architecture deal, and I went through Oxford University up until that point. And then I went to a school in London, an architectural school, and I studied architecture while working for the county architects department, and that's what I was doing when I first came to the States. Now, the reason I came to the States was another strange story. A friend of mine, one of my best friends, worked for a local newspaper, and at the time they was converting to doing typesetting on computers for the very first time. He happened to be a guy that learnt it, so all of a sudden he's the world's expert on typesetting on the computer, and he moved out to the States. He'd gone through an ugly divorce, and I just went out for a vacation, having a good time at the beach, meeting lots of nice California girls in their bikinis, who enticed by, didn't matter how ugly you were, if you had an English accent, it really helped. So then his job got some huge clients at the time. They didn't have illustrators that could do the illustrations they needed for some of the collateral material, and he said, I've got a friend from England who's done technical drawing and architectural, and he can do that stuff. I ended up working for the next 5 weeks as a consultant, earning silly money, saved them with a big deal with McDonnell Douglas, and so I got offered a job as a creative director for the second largest ad agency in the country.
Culturally, what was the big difference at that time between where you were at in England and Southern California? I mean, the sunny beaches, and you know what I mean? Like, what was it, a culture shock, or like what was it that you thought was so different?
It certainly was. It was like night and day. I didn't know the value of my salary. I didn't know how much the cost of living was out here. I was always converting pounds to dollars, and at that time we were at $4 to a pound. Now it's almost 1 to 1. So my savings in England aren't worth Jack Diddley now. But and the biggest difference I found was I bought a motorcycle as soon as I got out here. It wasn't anything spectacular because I needed a vehicle to drive. So I started off with a big old station wagon, Chevy station wagon, because I just couldn't believe how big a car could get after leaving England and seeing a station wagon, and we called it the Passion Wagon because it certainly was. I couldn't believe that you could, you got a bench seat in the back to go to drive-in movies, and it's like a separate room at the back of the car. I bought a little motorcycle. It was an enduro actually. I think it was a 360 or something.
Where'd you move into, like, first place in Southern California? That was yours?
I moved into, actually, Lakewood to the brother-in-law of my English friend who lived up in, lived up there by the studios.
Okay.
His wife worked at the studios and was Marty Feldman's personal assistant. So he was up north and I was down in Lakewood at his brother-in-law's. And here's a funny tie with the motorcycle world. He was originally from the East Coast and his brother was an enforcer with the Pagans back then. Wow. So I got to meet his brother and got to meet a bunch of Pagans back in the early days. Mm-hmm. Cool. And of course, being in California, the big four at the time was the Hells Angels, the Mongols, the Hessians, and the Vagos. So, and there was a lot of other good-sized clubs.
Yeah.
This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. You and I make decisions every day, but on Prize Picks, being right can get you paid.
Don't miss any of the excitement this season on Prize Picks, where it's good to be right.
They have a ton of different sports too, including my favorite, MMA.
I love it too, and it's great to be able to play it on Prize Picks.
Yeah, it's a whole new dimension and really gets me revved up for the fights.
I'm sure you and the guys will be talking about it at Jiu-Jitsu.
For sure. Prize Picks is also the best way to get action on sports in more than 40 plus states, including California, Texas, and Georgia.
Yep, almost anywhere. And Prize Picks puts their users first. So all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure.
Prize Picks offers Venmo, Apple Pay, MasterCard, and more for quick and easy deposits directly into your account.
Download the app today and use code PATCHED to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup.
That's code PATCHED to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. It's good to be right.
Patch merchandise is available at automotoentertainment.com.
Hey, what's up guys? This is Mooch. A lot of you have been asking where to get an autographed copy of my book, and the only place you're going to be able to get it is here at the automotoentertainment.com website. The link's down below. We'll have paperback and hardback, so click the link, check it out, and get your signed copy today.
That's great, Mooch. A lot of people have been asking me about that. It's a great read, and you guys got to check it out. Hey guys, I'd like to welcome a new sponsor to the Patch Podcast, California Car Cover. Known for being the ultimate provider of car care products and world's largest custom and car motorcycle cover source. Based in Southern California, they're a very familiar family-owned company that's been around for many years. The founder is an icon in the hot rod and drag racing community, whose life's passion for car care, especially car covers, is presented through a great, easy-to-navigate website and award-winning catalog. They've got everything a motoring enthusiast could ever want or need.
And they have an excellent selection of motorcycle covers as well, to fit any size bike with or without accessories. But don't stop there. They have anything you need for your car or truck, as well as thousands of possible great gift ideas. Just go to calcarcover.com and use the code PATCH10 to receive a 10% discount on any purchase. What came first for you, Spike, the Harley or the or being interested in motorcycle clubs?
I didn't think I'd ever be in a club. I was one of those guys that say, no, I don't need to be in a club. I don't need brotherhood. I get along with people, and I had, as you both know, if you're accepted, embraced by a club, you get a lot of perks, but you don't have to go through all the BS of everything else of being a club member and all the commitment. So I was embraced by all the major clubs. And so I'd go to all their runs, support all their runs. And so I was having a great time of it without having to commit to one club. And then when there was problems between the clubs, I didn't have to really take sides. I just say, hey, I'm here. Yes, I got friends in this club and that club, but I'm here to support you. And there was an acceptance level. So the bike came first. I went to a bunch of the major runs. I know the Loners put on the run out there, and I know the HA's put on a big run out there, and I go to all the big runs. Then I had a friend that was in the Hessians, and he was always wanting me to tag along because I'd been to Sturgis and I'd been to all the runs, and I was more familiar with a lot of the other clubs and the other runs, and it eventually just kind of became a hang around. But to be honest, I was kind of a hang around in several clubs because they all saw me as a guy they could trust. And
did that make it hard to decide which club you wanted to officially join?
It really did, you know, because I had friends. Actually, I had friends in all four of those clubs, the four big clubs, and the Loners and the Nuggets and a lot of other clubs. And I really didn't know the ins and outs of the club world as much
the
like
politics.
anyone first coming in.
Yeah, you didn't know the
and,
politics, right? You're just like, hey, man, these guys are cool over here. These guys are cool over there. It's a great.
And all four of those clubs had a reputation, and all four of those clubs had great guys. All four of those clubs had people I couldn't stand in them, and you know, it really was a crapshoot. And eventually, because I think back in the early days, the Hessians had the biggest numbers locally where I lived in my neighborhood. The Vargos were growing. The Mongols were big in LA County, although the Hessians had a strong LA County chapter. I gravitated towards another club other than the Hessians for a while, just because they were a little bit more open to the outside world, and the Hessians were really old school and kept themselves to themselves. And I kind of respected that, and I liked the reputation they'd got. The deciding factor was I had a good friend in the Hessians who was a tight friend. You know, he was encouraging me to go to all the events, and I had a really good time with them. Some of them were distant, but that was kind of encouraging to me. They didn't embrace me right away. They were the old school, hardcore guys that have been around a long time, and who's this young whippersnapper, and boy, he talks funny. He can't even say Hessian. He says Hessian. That's what's kind of spun me over, was there was some intrigue there, and they had a great reputation. There was a lot of them around, so it was cool.
And that's that presence. Like, you felt like, I want to be part of this presence, right? A lot of guys came into one spot to be at one location, and it felt like they were a big group. The large packs roll down the freeway, and you're like, man, I want to be part of that. That's amazing, right? Obviously, you have this above average intelligence. You take on this job at a marketing agency. You're in Southern California. You're still enthralled with motorcycles, and here you are, you're going to join a motorcycle club. Now, what was it like in the marketing world when people found out that you were also in this thing in the early 90s when, you know, things weren't exactly great to be in these clubs?
When I actually joined the club, I'd gone through a romantic breakup. I was going through a job change as well. I had my own business, so I had a little bit more freedom. I had a design business, a graphic design business. Even though later on I got back into the corporate world, I worked two big geotechnical companies in a management position, and then I got into a high-tech one, again, where we was designing hydrogen fuel cell engines, and we developed some new lighting technology. And I did explain to the jobs I had a commitment level where I would be, again, the four long weekends and that and runs, and I'd definitely be doing those. And
So
I
you
got to
started out being
say,
pretty upfront.
Told them what
right
was going
from
on.
day one.
Yeah.
I went for a 20-year period where I never missed a mandatory run. 20 years. And that's quite something in my mind.
That's
Were you in
amazing.
like
And,
romantic relationships of those times? Like a lot of the times we talk with our guests
yeah,
about.
sometimes 2 or 3 times a night. Yeah.
So did that change the balance as well between club and work balance / trying to be in a relationship balance? Like,
Were you constantly shifting this around? Because like what Mooch is trying to say is that you're focusing on work because you just got this job, but then you meet somebody and now you have to spend time like focusing on that fresh, but you're still like passionate about the club and saying I'm going on these mandatory runs and I'm not missing one. So like you have to separate yourself and then get back to that, so I know from the whole balancing act, like you know, when I had kids and the whole 9 yards and all that stuff, and the club and the charity, it's tough to say you're like going from one role to another role constantly.
Yeah, it wasn't so bad for me as the people that had more commitment outside of the club. I was committed to my jobs, but it was a well-known fact. I had my own Harley parking spot when I was a division manager, right outside my corner office window, and I'd ride up to work. I'd wear my cut to work, because riding the bike, I'd wear my cut. I was able to keep the two apart and still have an air of professionalism. When it came, I never had, I inherited families from time to time, but I didn't have my own kids. Per se, so I didn't have that commitment to have to worry about. And the ladies in my life, I'd always be really upfront there. It took a long time for me to get into a real commitment, and I didn't find that level until I found my wife that I'm with now, and we actually dated for a decade and a half before I said let's get married, sort of thing. I mean, she knew what she was getting, and
right. It sounds like the communication piece was like the strongest role, right? Like you were upfront with your work, you were upfront with the girlfriends.
I think so. Yeah,
I think so too. Like
Yeah.
just communicating openly what your commitment level was and where you're at with it, so there was no surprises to anybody.
And that takes
No.
off a level of stress from you, right? Because you've put it out there. Like we talked about earlier,
Yeah.
You're not putting on this character to try to say, oh, I'll be here and I'll be there and I'll be here, but you can't make it to those places, so you're constantly letting people down.
Yeah.
Up front with who you are and how you're going to do it.
I think that's a big help, and I don't think I'd probably be strong enough to deal with what some of the other guys I know in our community have to do.
Mm-hmm.
But there again, I tell everyone the only person that's got to be pleased with your performance is yourself. I tell the young guys coming in the club, you've got to be able to look at yourself in that mirror in the morning and say, am I doing what I need to do for the club? Am I doing what I need to do for me? Which includes, if you've got a family, your family and everything else. And you've got to prioritize. Well, with me, I've always prioritized the club. I've taken the good times in the club and the bad times, and there's been times where I haven't been at the top of the tree and I've lost a position. Some people will walk away then because they put their head in shame and walk away. Mm-hmm. And I said, I don't agree with what's going on. I don't agree with the way I've been treated. So what do? Do I walk away and run to another club? Do I quit the motorcycle world? I said, no, I'm going to hold my head up high and I'm going to be as good as I can be, whether I'm a prospect or whether I'm a president. And that's the way I think you've got to look at it. You've got to be loyal to your club and you've got to be loyal to your brothers, but you still got to stand up and speak your piece. Be a man.
Mm-hmm.
Spike, we had said before about just wearing the patch, right? The people that play a role because they put the patch on. And it's the same a lot of times with officers' patches, right? Or like you said, the presidency or whatever. And we've seen a lot of people when they're no longer in charge, they'll quit or they'll try and start a new chapter or they'll find ways to still stay in leadership. But what I respect is, and like what I've always said too, was I had the same voice in the room regardless of what position I was, right? So if we were at church, I'm going to say the same things regardless of what my title was. And if I was against something,
Sure.
I'm going to advocate for it or against it. So at a point, as just being who you are, like Jason is saying this whole time, shouldn't change with your title, right? And I would imagine with the amount of time you spent in the club, you spent time in various leadership positions, that you probably saw that, right?
Sure. I mean, I think I've taken on every position from early on in the club because of my knowledge of all the events and where they were. I was a road captain, and I took that job very seriously because we had guys with bikes with little peanut tanks and choppers that could only go 60 miles.
Exactly.
And that type.
They need to fill up.
and then I was vice president. I was sergeant at arms at local level and national. Taking on all those different roles, you learn those roles and try to understand them and pass on your knowledge to the new guys. But also, I went from a president to being a regular patch holder.
Same. Yep.
And I didn't feel good about doing it, but I wasn't gonna walk away. I love my club. I love my brothers, even the brothers that I perhaps wasn't getting along with. You're there for your brother, and that's the main thing. And it happens in our club. I'm pleased to see how we've stood up for one another over the years, and we've been under the microscope of law enforcement, and our leadership was taken away at an early stage, and on murder charges, which were the guy wasn't even around, but he was the head of the snake, and I believe they went after the head of the snake. That's what they do. That brother had terminal cancer, and they finally let him out, but he was put on non-association, and the only people he knows in the world are his really close family, and the club is a family. We've got a colourful past. We've had some real characters in the club. But I'm saddened to see the pictures on my wall in the office here and in my scrapbooks and everything else. So many members have passed, and a lot of them are even younger than me. And
it's the hard part about being in for so long, right? Is that's what you see. I do think with your example of going from president, so people are looking up to you, they're following your lead, to a regular member, you have a really good responsibility there, or an opportunity, so to speak, of to show their other members to model what a regular member looks like. You have all the skills and experience, especially into leadership. So now people are going to look at you as a regular member. How does he listen to orders? How is he following direction, right? Because you could be that disgruntled P that's like, oh, whatever, I don't agree. But you could also show the newer members what it's like to be a member, right? How to follow the rules and how to agree with things that you disagreed with, or how to follow the vote. So I think that opens the door to a lot of learning as well by going through that. You have years of experience with all sorts of clubs and hanging out with members from all sorts of clubs. And eventually you took that to start working towards the NCOM and COC. So how did that idea happen, and when did you start getting involved in that?
We got a good history, club. We had a member in our club that actually thought this idea up in the very beginning, that it would be good to bring the West Coast and East Coast together, bring clubs together, and a small handful, a group of bikers from California went across country and met with several clubs. They got a few people interested, and then we got some attorneys involved.
This is when Richard Lester became a big part of this.
Yeah,
big part of Southern California.
That's right,
Richard Lester.
And there was a money issue, and they said, we'll take care of the money issue, and they worked together, and they built up finally an infrastructure. And we had confederation of clubs growing all over the country. In California we had 7. I believe at one time Texas had 12, and other states had these COCs. And then to bring the COCs together so we could share information and have a national forum, we start the NCOM, and that's how that started. And they embraced the club patch holders and the MROs, the motorcycle rights organizations. And there were some other organizations, in fact some of the large clubs. I know the Hells Angels were spending a lot of time in the courtrooms, and they started fighting for bikers' rights, and they started up the MMA, the Modified motorcycle.
So, Spike, I'd last asked you kind of about COC and NCOM, and you explained how some of that was working, but where did you really start getting progress with that and feeling like it was making a change?
I think from kind of day one, and I'll tell you why, is it all stems back to our earlier conversation about me and helmets, and a helmet nearly taking my head off. I'm actually not a proponent of helmets. I think people should have freedom of choice. If they believe it's going to do them good, they should wear one. And if you don't wear one. But I could do a whole podcast on the pros and cons of wearing a helmet. And so I'd go up to the Capitol every year before they brought the helmet law into California and complain about the helmet law. And I was the guy that actually wore a helmet and got off worse than if I had not been wearing a helmet. To completely change my trajectory of where I was flying, and I flew down into the car because my head went down because of the weight of the helmet on my head, where I would have normally flown straight over the top and into some bushes and maybe, at worst broke a collarbone or something. So I've always been about bikers' rights. And then when I started riding in a club and getting stopped 3 or 4 times a day by local law enforcement, wanting to know everything about me and the club, and of course when you're a prospect you know nothing anyway, and I'd say I don't know. How many people you got in the club? I don't know. How many chaps you got? I don't know, officer. And I wasn't even telling porky pies. So it was the truth. And so I ended up having, it wasn't a hatred towards law enforcement. I respect law enforcement, and I know they got a tough job to do, and some of them can be real helpful. But I found these oddballs, I'd always be polite, with them. And at one point I got stopped by 22 cars and a helicopter for allegedly going around a car without signaling at midnight. I was with a prospect, and had a helicopter for an hour and a half overhead shining a light down on us right near Knott's Berry Farm, close to where I lived, in Buena Park. And I actually went online and checked out how much that cost the taxpayer for all of those officers, the helicopter, and you'd be blown away by how much that stopped. And at the end of it, ironically, I didn't even get a ticket, so I couldn't even go to court and complain. But I did go down to the local police department and complain about being stopped by all those cars, and they said, "You're exaggerating. We don't even have that many cars." I said, "Well, there was 2 police departments, Buena Park and Anaheim PD, plus CHP showed up, DEA, ATF." And I went on and on. They looked on the computer and said, "Oh, you're quite right." And I said, "I'm a tax-paying person. I've got a job. I pay my taxes." So that kind of thing that goes on with the bikers, I'm against the profiling. I'm against the way we get treated quite often. And so having an organization where we could come together, like the COC, share what's going on between the clubs with law enforcement, share what's going on with legislative issues such as lane sharing and having to wear helmets and ethanol in the gas and all these things that we want to keep an eye on at a legislative level. That's where this forum came into play. And the biggest, I think the greatest thing is when people such as Jason and some of his predecessors from his club, when they come down, when people from your ex-club come down, people from my club come down, and we reach out and we put our hands and embrace some of these other clubs from different parts of the hierarchy of the club structure and the club community. If you can shake hands with even a riding club member and say, "Hey, you're always invited to our events, just follow standard protocol and you'll be fine. We'd love to have your support." When you do that and reach out and you've got that interaction between all the clubs, I think that's invaluable.
Absolutely. And I saw it, in the Northwest and in the Midwest. I was somewhat involved in those COCs and stuff. And one big takeaway was like what you went through is so many members are getting pulled over and harassed and don't know what to do. And a big takeaway for me from the COC would help. A, they would let new members or new clubs know how to deal with law enforcement, but B, they would help you report these things. And even if you thought it wasn't going to go anywhere, you're building paper files, and that way, when these profiling laws come out, there's demographics, there's information to show that these things have been filed and there's been complaints made, and so that part of the COC I always thought was really, really cool, and it benefited me directly was things like that happened. I did wish down the road that, eventually I think it got more into specifically about legislation and less about like club on club politics, which we could talk about forever, so we'll do it another time. But I really think COC's played a big role, especially the NCOM, and a lot of people saw it after Texas.
Waco, I think after Waco, it wasn't so much the COCs. The COCs have played a big part and built up an infrastructure for this interaction. But what Jason and I witnessed was we were amongst a group of bikers that realized we didn't have a voice at Waco. When Waco went down, 177 bikers or people just in that environment there got arrested with one charge. And this was absolutely ridiculous. And we didn't have anyone speaking for us. The COCs didn't come up and talk to the newscasters and the news people and say, hey, that's not right. This was a meeting that went on for 25 years in Texas, a legislative meeting, 25 years. And in California, where we started, it'd been going on for 35 years. So this wasn't like they reported with a false narrative, a gang turf war. That's ridiculous. We had a member of a club there with the same itinerary that he was reading out there in Waco, Texas. A good brother of ours called Paul, and I had the same paperwork as Paul did, and I was going to be talking about the legislative issues in Anaheim, where Jason and I would meet, and we decided we didn't have a voice. So what are we going to do about it? So we got together and we started the Council of Clubs, which is different from the Confederation of Clubs, because the Council of Clubs is just made up of patch holders. And we had Double D's profiling project, the motorcycle profiling project, which had developed a survey, which again is so invaluable. The police don't have any statistics. Everyone throws out these things. Oh, the bikers are a bunch of criminals. They can say that all they like, but we have statistics to show how many bikers that have taken the survey have got felonies, how many 1%ers have felonies, and we know how many. We already know how much law enforcement's got a higher percentage of felons in their ranks than what the biker community does. So we can put these myths to bed. We've got just the biker club patch holders working together, and now we've got a national spokesperson in the guise of Double D and many other bikers in different clubs which are qualified and are going to put out the same statement. We've agreed that we'll put the same statement out so we're not fighting one another. That statement goes out. So if Waco happened tomorrow, and let's hope it never ever happens ever again, we won't have cops saying, oh yeah, we came down there and luckily we got there so quickly. They forgot to tell the general public that they was on that roof before anyone ever got there.
Yep.
They had their marksman in place, and there's a whole bunch of false narrative went out, and now we can stand up for our community and actually have someone who's knowledgeable, and people that were actually at the Waco trial as expert witnesses from the biker side of things, who can speak up and say, no, this is at least this is how we see it from our perspective. So you've got two perspectives and you can make up your own mind and not just deal with a false narrative.
I think that's great, and thank you for that distinction, because I do think a lot of people don't understand the difference between the COC and NCOM and the council, so I think that's a good distinction.
And just one other quick thing while we're on this with distinctions, and we have the MRF, which is the Motorcycle Rights Foundation, which is huge, and the club patch holders are now working with them, and they're like a glorified abate. A lot of their membership is abate, but they do all our federal legislation at a national level. And we've got the MRF, I say we because I'm a member of the MRF, and I suggest every biker should be part of an MRO. And the MRF has a lobbyist, a very good lobbyist, one of the very best companies, the firms, lobbying for the motorcycle community up in Washington, D.C.
Nice. And so just to give everybody at home like a shout out to these people who to invest their time into this stuff. This stuff is not fun. This is not a party. This is not where there's music playing and we're going out to bars. I mean, this is all extra time, extra work, all to take care of our brothers in the charters and in the clubs, regardless of what club they're in. We care about everyone that's on two wheels. So this is all extra. This is no one's patting you on the back. Your own club is saying, I don't even know why you go to these things. I mean, like, it is a ton of work with absolutely no praise whatsoever. And people do this year in, year out. Conference calls, meetings. It's a lot of it is monotonous. There's nothing fun about it. And I take my hat off to anyone who is involved in that aspect of the motorcycle culture, because they need to have gold medals handed out to these people, because it is definitely a thankless job.
And Jason, when did you get involved and to what level? And then just briefly, like, did you and Spike work together or work on things together?
So I got brought into this through my mentor in the club, who Andy. You know, I mean, a lot of people in Southern California knew Andy. He traveled and was everywhere around Southern California. Andy was a Satan slave who became a Hell's Angel, so a lot of respect. But Andy got involved in this stuff early, and then I started hanging out with Andy, and he's like, hey, we're going to these meetings. And we started going to the ones in Fullerton, if you remember that, Spike, before we switched over to Anaheim. And so like my first thing was like, I show up to this meeting at this place, and we had to like leave at like 2:30 in the afternoon, and 2.5 hours in traffic to get down to Fullerton, you can imagine. And I show up, and all I'd ever really known was like Hells Angels and Mongols. I'd never seen all these other clubs. You know, I grew up in Ventura County, and I'm hanging out in the San Fernando Valley with the Hells Angels. We saw some Vagos, you know, but really did not know a lot about these clubs. I show up to this meeting, and here we are. There's like 40 different clubs coming in groups of 3, 2, 1s, you know, singles, like getting off bikes and with different patches, and you're meeting these different people. And at the first time, a couple times I went, I never even went in the room because I was a prospect or a hang-around at the time. So I just stayed out on the patio and got to meet other prospects and hang-arounds from other clubs. So like right away, I kind of had this understanding that like we're all similar. We just found different paths. Like Spike said, he met a guy who was in the Hessians. I'm sure you have the same story where you met a guy who was in the Vagos, right? And I met a guy who was in the Hells Angels, you know, and that's how we got into our clubs. So I have a huge respect for like that whole thing that I was able to get to know early on in getting into the culture, and understanding that it's bigger than just us. Like, it's bigger than me just becoming a Hells Angel. It's bigger than just the Mongols and the Hells Angels and whatever problems or good times we have had. It's way bigger than that. So, like, I learned that all really early, you know, and I had a lot of respect for, like, being around Spike and seeing him as a role model, and Tombstone and seeing him as a role model, and also Rags, you know, and these guys, like, I looked up to them, and I felt like we had a true camaraderie. And like, I knew that if I was somewhere on the road with them at an airport or at a hotel, you know, that we were staying at, that these guys had my back. It was a magical time for me to be involved in that, you know. I always wanted to be able to tell people in my circle, like we talk about, we all have our circles, that I'm doing everything I can to be a good representation of the club. You know what I mean? I wanted to be able to tell my kids, my wife, my parents, everyone that I work with, like, hey, yeah, I'm a Hell's Angel, but like, it's not like that. It's not like what you think. Like, we all have like these roles and we have these jobs, and we there's things there's responsibilities to the club. There's a whole community here. And like, when I was involved in the COC and the NCOC, I really felt like that was where you felt the real culture come together. You know what I mean? And
you saw the change.
You saw the change.
Or the potential for change.
Yeah, the potential for change.
And Spike had brought up too how the motorcycle community, outdoes almost everybody in the country when it comes to donations and donating charitable organizations. And a lot of people don't know about that either.
Yeah, exactly. Nobody wants to talk about that positive stuff, but like, there are so many good things happening. And I've always said that if we ever really actually got together as a group, we'd be larger than the Teamsters Union, right? And everyone knows that, and they can justify that as a large group that is very powerful. And I'm like, we could be larger than that. So just to wrap it up, like, Spike, tell us about, like, how you've dealt with all the stuff internally, because a lot of the guys that listen to this podcast, they're all going through something, everyone's going through a struggle in their own mind, right? So how do you compartmentalize? How do you take a deep breath? What are you doing for exercise nowadays? Like, how do you get yourself...
the stress of the club life. Leadership.
How do you deal with it all?
I must say, first of all, I miss having my my brothers on the doorstep to go run amok and go for a ride, get some wind in their hair. I'm a nomad now. It takes, most clubs have similar guidelines for nomads. You have to be in the club for a certain length of time. You've got to ride so many miles. You've got to have at least some sort of seniority. I miss that, but I'm still out riding on a daily, try to do it on a daily, to do with the weather out here on the East Coast, a lot different from California.
What are you riding, Spike? What's your current bike?
My current bike is a Harley Davidson, not a Triumph, and it's right now I've got a road glide. I've had several street glides and several road glides, and I really like the road glide in the wind. And I go to a local bike night, not quite like the ones in California where we get rowdy and party down. We got some great characters. We go to a dairy bar that does good food. They don't sell moonshine and they don't sell alcohol, so
it keeps it mellow.
It keeps it mellow. There's some great guys down there. They've embraced my wife and I. She also rides a Harley. She's got a Deuce with apes and that, and so she's a little bit different showing up down there. I still do the Monday night calls with our council of clubs, and we talk about interesting things that are going on legislatively and in the profile areas, and we actually have a call with over 50 representatives around the different states around the country. So that's a weekly thing. We have national meetings for that, where we meet different parts of the nation twice a year, and we work in conjunction with the other groups that are out there.
What about your health, your exercise? What are you doing nowadays for your exercise?
Being that our daughter has a 34-acre farm, I seem to always be out there, with a chainsaw in my hands, chopping down trees or driving a tractor, or of course with the sun and the rain as it's been, grass grows so fast overnight. You're almost mowing at least weekly. So I'm keeping very active there. I've been watching my health and diet. I'm still doing a little workout regime.
We've had a lot of guests on here that you're still in the club, but we've had, guests that have retired or left or taken a step back, and replacing that, like you said, coming from California, the 7 nights a week, or, those peak levels that we were at years ago, replacing that as you age. What we've seen and what a lot of our guests are saying is the key to them is staying active and then finding something to still be passionate about. And so since you're still involved in the in the council or the club stuff, and now and then you're out on the farm and you're staying active. I think that's something that our older members can look at and say, yeah, that's something I can do too.
Yeah.
Jason, I know, like you said, that Spike had this presence, and so you guys knew of each other, but when did that relationship really go to the next level where you guys were working on something or spending more time together? When did that really kind of relationship blossom where you guys really got to know each other on another level?
I think where my respect and closeness come with many of the individuals I dealt with was when they showed their commitment to a project. And when we went out to, especially after the Waco incident, here we have Jason by himself going out to an area which is dominated by another large club, which was involved with the Waco incident, and for him to come out and stand alone, as with other members of large clubs, like we had Rags from the Mongols, myself from the Hessians. When we show up at places and we're surrounded by clubs that we don't generally get along with on the streets, but we're there for business, and we go in there and we stand tall and we show respect to the other clubs, that's when you get this this feeling that you want to sit down and sing Kumbaya. It's I get a lot of respect for Jason and like I said, some other individuals, but with Jason, I remember him walking into the Lion's Den several times where we'd be at a national event where he's totally surrounded by people that on paper have no love for him or his club, but he stands tall, shows and showed respect, a mutual respect, put his hand out, wasn't afraid to talk to clubs that are in the echelon of the biker community. He wasn't too important to be able to shake hands with someone from a lesser club in the hierarchy. And that to me gained my respect, and we would hang out together, and basically I'd have his back, he'd have my back, and it was the same with everyone in our group. We all had one another's backs, although we come from every club out there, and that's when you get tight.
So Spike, where can people support your organizations that you're at now, or are you on social media? Do you have what are you doing, and how can it followers support you?
I don't do anything as far as social media. I do subscribe to ABATE and the MRF, the Motorcycle Rights Foundation, and we have they have a meeting of the minds once a year where we talk about topics that need to be brought up in the motorcycle world for legislative issues, and they prioritize what's the biggest thing to work on in Washington DC, and I take my hat off to that organization. It's a great organization, and they do stuff for us in the background that we have no knowledge of. We wouldn't be riding bikes that aren't modified if it wasn't for the guys that do that type of work, right, like Jason said. Mm-hmm. And we might not even give them a second glance, because a lot of them are just regular independent bikers, and they just do their thing, but they're committed to the community, and I really appreciate them. So the MRF is a great organization. Local abates, if you can get involved, they help with state legislation, and it doesn't matter if you're a patch holder or not. Just get involved, and keep the support going for these great organizations that do stuff behind our backs.
I think that's amazing that you just said that you don't need to be a patch holder to get involved. So for our listeners who are listening to this and are looking for something that they want to still fill that empty void with, that they don't have anymore from being out of the clubs, get involved with one of these organizations. They would love to have another volunteer. They would love to have somebody that wants to get passionate about it. And who better to get passionate about it than somebody who had a patch on their back? So absolutely. I think that's a great shout out like that, Spike. I mean, I love that you brought that up, because we have not talked about any of that on this podcast yet.
Thanks so much for joining
Yeah.
us, Spike. And for all our viewers, don't forget Automoto website for merchandise, T-shirts, books, and then past episodes. So check those out. And then Spike, hopefully we'll talk with you again soon.
Thank you. It's been a privilege and great to see you both, and good to see you again, Jason.
Yes.
And best of luck. Great show.
Love you, brother.
Thank you.
This portion of the podcast is brought to you by First Bank.
Thanks, First Bank.
Remember to hit the like and subscribe buttons below. Find us on Instagram at automoto.ent, at OG_Mooch, at Jason_Logan81, and for more info and episodes, go to automotoentertainment.com. Thank you for tuning in. See you on the next episode of Patch. Patch merchandise is available at automotoentertainment.com. The Patch podcast series is brought to you by Oak and Iron, Craft Cocktail Bar in Thousand Oaks, California. By Outdoor Creations, serving the Southern California and Nashville areas.